Welcome to Life and DNA with Amanda Renee. I'm so glad you joined me today. Let's get started. Hey everyone, it's Amanda. Today we're going to talk about a few different things. I know last week I said we would talk about Walter's adopted family, and I do want to touch on that a little bit. When I got to looking at my paperwork, I really didn't have a ton of information on them. The second family, there were several people by that name, and I have not been able to narrow down which one for sure it is. But when I do find more information, I will come on here and talk about it. The first family that adopted him was a German family by the name of Schuppmann, and he was 3 when they adopted him. My theory, and one of their relatives that I have messaged back and forth on Ancestry with, also believes that they weren't able to have children at first, or thought they weren't able to have children. And if you look at the census records, it looked like they were married around 7 years and had no children up until then. So then they adopted Walter. And then once they had him, I think it was like a year or 2 later, based on the kids' ages on the census records, they started having kids. And then they had multiple kids. So he stayed with them. And it looks like, the economy I don't think was great in Missouri around close to 1920. And so they took him back to the orphanage. They would have been the only family he knew. And according to the relative, I think it's Mr. Schuppmann's great granddaughter. According to her, Walter and one of the sons stayed really close. Even after they took him back when they were adults, they lived next to each other and things like that. So I thought that was really cool. Now, in the newspaper article that Walter put in, the one that gave me most of my information on him, he said they took him back in 1917, but I think either he was mistaken or misquoted, because in the 1920 census, he is still shown to live with the Schuppmanns. And so around 1920, they took him back. I am not sure what year Harry Hellman adopted him, but he would have been older than 13. And again, I don't have much information. I would have to, my husband has to fill out this one form, and then I would have to get copies of several birth certificates to prove his connection to Walter in order to get that document. I have the original document from when the Schuppmanns adopted him, but the documents started going through a different place by the time the second adoption happened, and so I have to have proof that my husband's related to him in order to get that document. And I just don't know if I can talk everybody into letting me have copies of their birth certificates or not. So I guess we'll see if someday I can get my hands on that. But as of now, I don't, and I can only speculate as to why the Hellmans would adopt a teenage boy. I know a lot of people were farmers or had big farms, and so they would sometimes adopt, if they didn't have sons, they would adopt boys to come and help work on the farm. So that's a possibility. And because he was 13 in 1920, because the census was before his birthday. So the next census was 1930. He would have been 23. So he was on his own. He's listed as a boarder in a house with a bunch of other people. So I don't have a census record showing him with the Hellmans, so I don't know who else was even living there. But I am trying to dig more into that. So the other thing I wanted to talk about today is kind of a mixture of family history things and what I talk about a lot on Thursdays, which is narcissistic families. Because when I was researching my family, I found a similarity to something that happened in the past to something going on in my family dynamic right now. So I started researching like family cults, and there are certain traits that cults have that narcissistic families can have in common with that. And some of those characteristics where you can't challenge that group's reality. Like they set the reality, typically the leader, who is either a narcissist or a psychopath, and they tell you what reality is, and you cannot challenge that. Individuation is punished. You are who they want you to be, or you are punished in some way. Either, I'm guessing in extreme instances it could be physically. I know in my case it was more of a emotional, we'll give you the silent treatment kind of thing. There's no boundaries. There's always a golden child and a scapegoat. And the narcissist or the leader, they will pit the people against each other. In my case, and like in the family cult dynamic, it's typically the siblings. I have 3 sisters, and well, I have 2 half brothers also. But growing up, we were always, at odds with each other a lot. And I used to just think, oh my gosh, my sisters were just brats. But now looking back, knowing what our mom did as adults, I think that she might have instigated a lot of that when we were children. Because, if we banded together, then we would be harder to manipulate and control. But if she keeps us separated, then we can each, have our different dynamic with her. So it would also pit you against other relatives. Now, I do remember very clearly my mom doing this. She was always playing the victim. She would say my grandma didn't like her. She would say she would always call her, my dad's wife. She would never say her name. Well, as an adult dealing with my grandma's just not great with names anyway. And my mom was not the only person she referred to like that. Like, she would refer to everybody, as her kid's spouse. Like, that's just kind of how she worded things. But my mom would twist it and, oh, well, she just hates her. And same with aunts, uncles. I think there was only like one cousin she really got along with. The rest of them, she would just kind of just put little things out there to where we wouldn't fully trust or like them. I don't know, it's almost like we couldn't get too close to anyone else because then she would be, jealous that our attention was somewhere else. Let's see. Narcissist is always the right one and the one you come to. So they'll try to make it where they're the one, if you have a problem, they're the one you go to for answers, and they're the one you confide in, and they will get you to trust them, and then even if they are very untrustworthy, because then you share things and they will go and share your personal details with others that you would have never wanted that shared. I do remember a very clear instance. I know this happened many times to me growing up, but one time I was in my 20s still, early 20s, so I still lived at home, and I had misguidingly told my mother about kissing this one particular boy. And my mom and I were shopping in Walmart, and we ran into this boy's brother, and then my mom proceeds to talk about that private thing that I was telling her about to his brother in Walmart, just in the middle of Walmart. I was like humiliated, devastated, and that was just one of many instances. There are so many things I wish I could go back in time and not share with her. Let's see. There's lots of gossiping. That's in cults as well as in the family cult. My mom, and when I was listening to the video on this, they were saying especially on the phone, like, oh, did you hear about so-and-so's marriage? Or did you hear about so-and-so being sick? Oh my goodness, I think they're gonna die. Like, my mom was and is still always on the phone. Her and my grandmother would like feed each other on that. Like, my grandma was, I love my grandma, but she was very, very bad about that. She would call all the family members and get all the information. Well, my mom is the same way. And everything was like dramatic and twisted. But she would call all four of us, find out what was going on with us, but then tell the other sisters what was going on, but twist it or exaggerate it. So then we would think, oh no, something's wrong. And once we started talking to each other, finally, instead of just taking our mom's word at things, we realized, okay, mom's exaggerating, and you're not really fixing to get divorced. Oh my goodness. So lots of gossiping. The covert narcissist and leader of the family cults will be super sweet to people's faces and then gossip behind their back, and that is very much my mother. And it just seems more, I mean, all of us, we're not all gonna go out and call people out on things we don't like about them. We'll be nicer to people than we really feel. I get that. That's just, being a decent human being. But it's different when it's a narcissist, because they will be overly sweet and overly friendly because they want that person to trust them. They want them to like them, think that they're so wonderful and great, and they can get information out of them to then turn around and dig at them with. But all with a smile on their face. And that is covert narcissist. But with my mother, it seems much more diabolical now because she claims to be a preacher. And so, like I said before, I would see her do this to people in the church. And that's just disgusting. Like, there's people that I will see they will comment on her Facebook stuff, and they're just like, oh, you're the best, you're so sweet, oh, you do so much for us. But I'm like, if all of those people could see what she says as soon as she leaves them, they would see a very different side to her. And yeah, again, it just seems extra bad when you claim to be a preacher, and then this is how you're talking about people. In the family cult dynamic, you have the abusers and the enablers, and sometimes the enablers will even be their flying monkeys. The flying monkeys are the ones that go around talking up the narcissist leader, even when they know that they're wrong. This probably was me growing up, not realizing, because like I said, I didn't realize what my mom was until I was in my 40s. I was convinced my mom was the most wonderful person in the world, and I would have told people that if they challenged me on it. Of course, not very many people challenged me on it at that time. I have had an instance in the past few years where I made a comment on my own Facebook, and a friend of my mother's read it and private messaged me. They're like, how could you say that? And your mom's like so great. And I'm like, you do not know. And what I wanted to say was, if you knew what she said about you, you wouldn't be defending her. But I didn't want to hurt her feelings, so I just kind of left it as what I was dealing with my mother. But now, one of my half brothers is the main flying monkey right now. My stepdad too, because when everything was happening with our mom, I tried to reach out to my stepdad, was just trying to explain in case he didn't realize why, I wasn't going to come to Thanksgiving, why things were going south really fast. I was just trying to explain that to him, and then he turned around. I even mailed it to his work because I knew if it came to the house, she would probably open it or at least know it was there and read it. And so I sent it to his work where he could read it in private and do with it what he wanted. Well, he apparently took it home and let my mom and at least one of my brothers read it. And my brother, who is almost 20 years younger than me, proceeded to message me and inform me that they were all four in agreement with whatever was going on. And that right there is what sealed the whole this is a family cult kind of thing. Because that's how family cults are. It's very much it's us against you. And in this case, it's very much my mom and her new family and her first set of kids, which is me and my sisters, are, next to nothing now. And I kind of started seeing signs of that years ago, even before anything came out. There was a piece of land. I lived on it for years. My dad lived on it a long time. My grandma owned it. She was going to leave it to my mom when she passed, and she did, so she has. But all growing up, I dreamed of living there. I loved this piece of land. It was very, very pretty to me. The house was old and is falling in now. But even after I got married and stuff, for a while, I still dreamed of, knocking that house down, building a new house, and living on that land. Because, I thought, oh, well, I'll be close to my mom. She can watch her grandkids and play with her grandkids. Well, yeah, that wasn't going to happen. I found that out later. But when I still had this dream, I had said something to my mom about it. Well, then she wanted me to immediately start paying for it. I'm like, this is just a dream I have. It isn't something financially we can do right now. I didn't even know if my husband was on board with that. And he definitely wouldn't be within a few years of this happening. But I was like, this isn't something I can do right now. So then she informed me that, oh, well, my brother wanted it now. So he gets it. And, which, it turned out that's perfectly fine. I wouldn't want to be anywhere near that close to them anyway. But it was little things like that where I realized we were kind of being edged out when I still went to church there. She made a statement in one of her sermons one time saying that something about inheritance, and made it known we had never discussed this outside of this sermon. Never. And she let me know, or let everyone know in that sermon, that my brothers would inherit the house and the land that I grew up on. And that hurt. Not that I care about the house. I mean, they haven't taken super great care of it. And I always did love that land and that spot. But it wasn't that. It was the, well, these are my kids now. Your dad can just provide you with whatever. These are my kids that I care about and are gonna provide for someday. They're the only ones I care. That's what that statement felt like. That was what, when she said that, that's what I heard. And then when everything went down and she wasn't going to come to our kids' birthdays, and then it was like, and don't even worry about Thanksgiving. That's how she was at first. Now all of a sudden she wants my sisters to come, but I refused to go. It was just very much edging us out. Well, we challenged her reality, and so now we are not in the inner circle anymore, and that is very much on par with a family cult dynamic. The narcissist cult leader will do the love bombing and then devaluing cycle. And love bombing isn't always, gushy gushy, but my mom will pull that, very much pulls that. But then when you get sucked in just a little bit, boom, there's a dig. There's a backhanded comment, backhanded compliment, and you're put back in your place. And then, which is why I stay gray rock with her. I am as boring and unemotional as humanly possible with her. Let's see. Any disagreement to their reality will be punished. Like I said, yes. Mantras are used to excuse the abuse. Family's more important than anything, or, oh, that's just mom, or, oh, that's just, whoever the narcissist is. And there's spiritual and religious abuse. They use their beliefs to abuse the family. And when my mom started, down this path, she very much did that. Oh, well, God doesn't want you to do that. Or, oh, you're a sinner if you do that. She would, or you're so negative. You need to be more positive. That was a big one with her. She would, things would be wrong with my brothers, a sickness or something. She would hint that it was really, really bad, but she would never come out and tell you what they had. And then she wouldn't take them to the doctor to get help. And so, who knows what they've been through, but they're sucked in, and she's got her tentacles in there, so I don't even know if they'll ever get out. I pray for them a lot, because I worry for them. Because of the whole, her using religion and her using, God talking to her, even though she out and out lies about that. Because of that, it's even more now. So now, in order for them to get out, not only are you going against Mom, but according to her, well, you'd be going against God. And if they see it that way, they would never do it. And that's really hard. And but God's bigger than my mom's narcissism, so I pray that they get out of that. In a cult family situation, a lot of times they'll hold the will over your head. Like I said, my mom let it be known pretty quick that I was on the outs. Not that I was worried about that. And because of the next point, there's no money to even leave to anybody because they spend it all up. Her thing is wanting a little commune out there. There's almost a worshiping of the covert narcissist. No one believes that they could be bad. And this is very true. There are very few people. Now, the people on my dad's side of the family, they saw this a long time ago. And they're like, oh my gosh, we're so glad you finally opened your eyes to what we saw. They were so much smarter than I was living in it. They helped me through this, my dad, my sisters. There isn't really anybody outside of that realizes anything because, I'm not on a diabolical mission to, ruin my mother or anything like that. So I haven't really discussed it with very many people outside of family. Just for that reason, I'm like, let them, as long as she isn't, hurting them in some way. If I saw that her lies were actually hurting someone, yes, then I would say something. But now it's just, it's just to keep her image. Once you're out of this family cult dynamic, you have to build self-trust. Because they didn't want you to trust yourself. Yes, and this has been really, really, really hard for me. I am still working on that. I always thought I was just a very indecisive person. But I realize now it was because I was taught not to trust myself. I mean, anytime I would have a decision to make growing up, I would go to my mom for advice, but if I told her what I thought I should do, she would twist it around and question me, question what I wanted to do, to the point where I'm like, okay, so is what I think is right really the right way to go? Should I do this? And I stayed so confused that I couldn't make a decision, and I am still a little bit that way to this day. But I will say that I am extremely thankful that I am out of there, and now I can just work on myself, work on building that self-trust back up. And I slowly am. I'm getting there. But it isn't easy. I am so thankful I had my 3 sisters and my dad. If I wouldn't have had them, I really don't think my eyes would have been open to anything. And I would have been stuck in that process. and it's just in my mom's crazy world forever. And that's a scary thought. I am very thankful that I got out of that. But that was kind of what I wanted to talk about today. It kind of linked, the family dynamic. Oh, what I was going to connect with that, with the DNA, was, so my mom, all of those traits of a family cult, to say that my mom has a family cult. And when I was researching my family tree, her father's line, when I followed that, I found a relative in the 1800s that left his entire family for what would be considered now a cult. It was a branch religion off the Quakers called the Shakers, because of the way they shook around when they did praise and worship. And he had a wife and like 5 or 6 kids and left them. He tried to take his wife, but this religion didn't believe in marriage, which is crazy to me, because if you read the Bible, God very much is pro-marriage. I mean, he invented marriage, and in Proverbs he says, if you find a wife, you find a good thing. There are multiple verses talking about marriage being a good thing. But this woman from England and a few of her followers came to America and started this religion here. You could not be married. So if you already were married, then you basically like dissolved that. Like, you were no longer considered married. You had to be celibate. You were not allowed to have any physical contact with your spouse anymore, or with anyone. So because of that, there were no children born. So the only children coming in were either with the family, or they would adopt people. Like, so if, say, a kid was an orphan or something, and this family found out, or this group found out about it, they would, offer that child a place to come and stay. Apparently they were kind of ahead of their time in some areas. They believed in gender equality, race equality to a certain degree, and they were very, good with money and productive and things like that. But if you were married, you didn't have your family anymore. So my, whatever great grandfather tried to get his wife to come, but she was like, no, I'm not leaving our kids. I'm not abandoning our marriage and our home for this crazy lady over here leading this religion. And he left her. And 2 of his brothers also. I think one of his brothers was actually part of getting this particular Pleasant Hill community in Kentucky. And I think one of his brothers was instrumental in getting that place even started. And so he left his family. He just left them to fend for themselves. In a time where women, didn't go out to work. And I think it was several years before she got to remarry. And his kids were pretty resentful for that. I found a document online when researching it, and there were actually letters from some of the other family members, and then a letter from this guy that abandoned his family to one of his sons and daughters. After they were adults, he wrote to them And you can just, his attitude toward them was gross. I mean, to me, to knowing what he did, leaving them just to go live on this live at this place. And I guess their whole belief was, you can get closer to God. They believed in like they would claim to have visions from dead biblical characters, like the apostles and different people from the Bible, and then they would tell them things, or they would hear messages from angels. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure there's a verse in the Bible that said, even if an angel came and said to me something, if it didn't match up what God has already said, then you don't believe it. So yeah, it was a little out there. At the end of this letter, he even quoted something, and he was saying it was John 17:14. Well, I looked the verse up. That verse ain't in the Bible, not in the versions I've read, where it was like basically saying it was evil to get married because it meant you were part of the world. And after reading some of the some articles on the Shakers, when I read that they would have visions and stuff, I'm like, oh, well, okay, well, he was quoting, I think, someone's vision that they had written down. They would write down what these visions said to them, and I think they must have made that doctrine. So I think that's the John that he was quoting, because that is not in any of the versions of the Bible that I have. But yet he was basically like claiming his daughter, like she had at once had God in her life, but now obviously she didn't, and he was putting them down and then making himself like a martyr, like, oh, because everyone had thought bad of him for leaving his family. Well, duh. I mean, there's pretty sure there's a verse in the Bible too where it's like, if you don't take care of your family, you're worse than an infidel, or something like that, something to that effect. Like, you're supposed to provide and take care of your family, not ditch them for some fanatic belief. But once I found that story, and once I read those letters and saw all of that, I was like, wow, it is so crazy how history repeats itself in families. It's weird to me. And I wonder if there were any other instances, if I do more digging into my family, if there are other things like that. Because I know I did have several preachers on that side of the family. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting that even a family cult would repeat itself. So I hope you found that interesting. And join me, Thursday. I will be talking about a little more about Hashimoto's, about my weight loss journey, or my struggle to lose weight with Hashimoto's, on Thursday. And then next week I will talk more about Walter and getting closer to finding his parents. So I'm really excited to share that with you guys. So thank you all for listening. Thank you for listening to Life and DNA with Amanda Renee. Join me next week as we talk more about the family mystery. See you then.